Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program in sandbox mode, where Jeb and I have fun with rockets. Although in this case we're going to have fun with snacks, because Gene has decided that the health and safety of his astronauts is paramount. So he has engaged Thunder Aerospace Corporation to install life support, the TAC life support modules, into all of our capsules and spaceships. Now, when you install TAC life support into your game, the first thing you'll see is this screen when you enter a new save. It'll just be asking you to accept all of the defaults for the game. So we'll just accept that and mosey on down. Now, if you want to reset your settings, you can just bring up your toolbar button if you've installed the toolbar, and from there you can change whether TAC life support is enabled or disabled for this save, and you can also change some of the life support related settings. So for example, whether your Kerbals will respawn if they die. Of course they never die, do they? Obviously. How long in game seconds it will take before your heroic Kerbals respawn, and then you can change some of the default settings, such as how quickly resources are consumed, the maximum time Kerbals will live without resources, and what the default amounts of resources are for Kerbals. Now we'll get a little bit more detail on what that means in just a moment. So let's go over to the VAB and find out what TAC life support does for your vehicles. Okay, so here we are in the VAB. So how has TAC life support changed VAB? Well, it's made some modifications to some of the parts, particularly the types of parts that Kerbals will find themselves living in. So for example, in the lander can, if you right click the lander can to get out more information about the lander can, you'll see that it is equipped with TAC life support, and that has added a number of resources to the lander can itself. So you can see there are some waste style resources, carbon dioxide, waste materials such as snack wrappers, and waste water, but there are also some positive resources such as food, oxygen, and of course water. Now each of these resources has an amount, so that's the amount that either the positive resource will be at full capacity, so water, there's 0.7 of a unit of water, and the negative resources start off at 0, and they're obviously the waste materials that will have to be stored in the lander can in this example whilst your vehicle is in flight to wherever it's going. So the lander can's got 111 units of oxygen, for example. It's got 1.1 unit of food, and so on. Other vehicles, such as the command pod, will have their own amount. In this case, it's I think it's exactly the same as the lander can. Not entirely surprising, I suppose. But then you look at the larger command pod, you can see it's got 3.3 food, it's got 333.1 oxygen, so obviously give or take 3 times the capacity of the equivalent Mark 1 commander pod, and so on. So let's take the lander can, for example, as the payload we might want to take into space. But it's not just about the capacity of the lander can itself. The other thing that TAC life support adds are a number of parts, and these parts come in 3 types. There are these round containers. In this case, this container contains additional food supplies, so that's 240 units of food, and they come in the standard size, the large size, and of course the little tiny size. So those are the pretty standard sizes you have until obviously the NASA parts came out. You'll get a similar style of container for, in this example, all 3 materials. So you can see we've got food, oxygen and water in the same device, and you can see there with the additional information panel on the right how much food, oxygen and water that additional container holds. And there are also containers for oxygen, and there's another container, let's have a look, this one, which holds just water. So you can either have 3 containers holding one type of material, or you can just have a shared container. It depends on what your mission's going to be, how long you're going to be in flight, how many Kerbals you have, and so on. Now these round containers also come in these hex can styles. So for example, you could have one of these medium-sized hex cans of oxygen, and of course you get one for water as well. So there's the water can, and let's have a look. There's food cans and general. There we go. There's another example of, in this case, the mixed can, and they come in 3 sizes as well. They come in this sort of medium size, they come in the jumbo size, and they come in the small size as well. And you can side mount them, or they do have mounting points on top and bottom if you prefer. But there is a third style of can. You have the waste can that can simply contain, in this case, the mixed waste products. So if you don't want to store the individual products in the individual waste disposal system in your can, you can add an additional waste can to the top. Now finally, you have these converter containers. In this case, this converter container will convert intake air, so basically filtering internal air using electricity to produce oxygen. But you can also produce oxygen by converting the CO2 that you're slowly accumulating, and in this case CO2 plus electric charge generates oxygen and waste. Obviously you need to store the waste and you need to be able to generate the electric charge, so there are balances that you need to put into all of this, something else for you to manage. And of course they come in the various shapes and sizes, although in this case you only get the medium and small, medium and large size, and allowing you to convert all the materials into all the other materials. So in this case you can convert water into oxygen, you can clean your wastewater. Yeah, I don't like the sound of that one. And as you see here, you can convert internal air into oxygen. So it is all about balancing what your Kerbal's going to need for their journey with what you can store. Now for information on that front, while you're in the VAB, you can right click your can in this example, see how much food, water and oxygen is already in your can, and how much waste materials you're carrying. And like food, fuel, water, you can preset the amount if you prefer. So you might actually want to preload carbon dioxide, waste and wastewater if you wanted to start your reactions for your proactive containers early on in the flight. And this becomes, I guess, kind of useful when you go on to the more advanced add-on packs, such as those for the moon bases and that kind of thing, where you actually want to start processing these materials early on just to see how your moon base is going. So bear that in mind if you wanted to be proactive. But let's see how this works in reality by looking at one I made earlier and actually going on a mission. I'll see you in a moment. So here is our simple moon lander fitted with our 2 example TAC containers. This container has just food, oxygen and water in it, while this one contains waste food, waste CO2 and waste water. So what we're going to do now is head out to the launch pad and just take our reference position, our initial position, to see how our resources can be viewed and managed. I'll see you on the launch pad. Right, at first glance nothing seems to have changed. We can still see our modules there on the side, but if you go to your resources panel, you'll now see that you have the additional resources we saw in the VAB listed out on the resources panel. So the oxygen, carbon dioxide, waste food wrappers, waste water, along with liquid fuel and oxidizer that you would expect to see. So all we need to do now is get ourselves to Minimus to see how our flight out consumes those resources and how well we can manage them over the course of a flight. So I will see you in orbit around Minimus. So here we are in orbit around Minimus, and we can see how Jeb's doing in terms of his resources by checking out the summary resource list in the top right hand corner. So you can see he has already got through about 2/3 of his food, about the same amount of water and oxygen, and you can also see the waste products are starting to build up as well. Now you can see those in the summary screen, and you can also see them by clicking on the individual modules to see how much that module's capacity has been increased, in this case in terms of waste, in terms of how it's being used, or how the content is being decreased, again by clicking on the individual modules. And the same is true for the capsule. So along with the capsule's usual information, you've also got its food, water, oxygen and so on listed out there as additional resources. But you can also see a sort of mission summary by checking out your TAC life support monitoring window. So for example, this is the life support monitoring for this whole lander. It was last updated just now, and you can see how many days water, food and oxygen as well as electricity is remaining in the capsule. As far as individual Kerbals, you can look at the Kerbal roster and you can see that Jeb was last eating just this last few seconds ago, along with having a glass of water to wash down his snack. So again, you can see how well individuals of Kerbals are doing as part of the resource consumption process. So let's extend this mission a little bit and go and land on the moon, on Minimus, and do some science. See you there. Right, so here we are. Jeb is collecting his science in the lowlands biome on Minimus, and what you can see now in the summary screen is not the resources for the entire craft, but just the resources for Jeb. So Jeb's food, water and oxygen supplies, his carbon dioxide produced, and his waste and waste water produced. Yes, that doesn't bear thinking about really. So what this does mean that if you leave a Kerbal out on the surface while you go to rescue him, crashed craft and all that being what Kerbal Space Program is all about, he could be in trouble. So bear that in mind. But let's get back onto the spaceship and go back to Kerbin. Before we leave for Kerbin, I thought it'd be a good idea to get a quick snapshot of what our resources are after our surface mission to Minimus. You'll see that we're now still not doing too bad on food, but then we didn't spend too much time on the surface. Same for water and oxygen. So if you're only down on the surface for a few minutes to collect your science and then get back into orbit, you're not going to be using up very much of your supplies, and you're not going to be creating very many waste products. But bear in mind, longer missions to the surface, particularly if you're going to build moon bases or even orbital bases, you may have to worry about constant resupply or using some of those modules that will convert waste products back into useful products. So take care with your food, water and oxygen supplies when you're on extended missions, particularly to the surface. See you back at Kerbin. Okay, so we're almost back in the atmosphere, preparing to decelerate with our aero brake, and you can see that our total mission has now consumed a good 80% of our proactive supplies, and we're about halfway through our waste storage. Now, we did pretty well for our liquid fuel and oxidizer. We still got a little bit left there, so Minimus landings are pretty straightforward as far as that's concerned. We have plenty of electric charge, we can see from the same resources sheet. So you can see how you can balance your food, your positive supplies, with your waste supplies, your negative supplies, just like you do with liquid fuel, oxidizer, electric charge and so on, that you've been familiar with all along. Now Jeb's going to get back to the KSC to report on how well his mission went, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. You take care. Bye bye.